You are not broke because money is not coming to you. You are broke because something inside you is quietly pushing it away. Stay with me for a moment because this is not another talk about working harder or chasing opportunities. This goes deeper than that. This is about something most people feel but never understand. That strange heaviness when you try your best and still nothing changes. That silent question that keeps showing up at night. Why does it feel like life is holding something back from me? If you feel stuck, if you feel like you are doing everything right but results are not showing up, then this message was meant to find you. Not by accident, not randomly, but because a part of you is ready to hear something different. For a long time, I believed money only came through effort, struggle, and constant pressure. I pushed harder, I stayed up longer, I tried to control everything, and still, nothing truly shifted. The more I chased it, the further it seemed to move away. Then something changed. Not outside. Inside. I stopped trying to force money into my life and started paying attention to something almost invisible. Something that happens every single night right before you fall asleep. A small window where your mind becomes quiet but powerful in a way most people completely ignore. I did not work harder. I tuned differently. And slowly, things began to move. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in quiet, undeniable moments. Money started showing up, unexpectedly, repeatedly, 12 times. And each time it felt less like luck and more like alignment. But before I tell you exactly what I did, stay with me. Because what comes next will completely change how you see not just money, but yourself. Most people will never hear this, not because it is hidden, but because they stop too soon. There is a reason why nights feel heavier when life feels uncertain. There is a reason your thoughts become louder in the dark. And there is a reason that the final few minutes before sleep can either keep you stuck or quietly transform everything. In the next few minutes, you will understand what that before sleep vibration really is, why it works even when nothing else seems to, and how you can begin using it tonight without forcing anything or pretending to believe something you do not. This is not about pretending to be positive. This is not about denying reality. This is about shifting something deeper than both. If you are ready to understand why things have felt blocked and how to gently remove that block from within, then you are exactly where you need to be. Welcome to the channel. If this kind of message speaks to you, make sure you subscribe because some truths only reveal themselves when you are willing to stay just a little longer. The strange part is, my lowest moment did not look dramatic from the outside, but inside, everything felt like it was collapsing. There was one night I remember clearly. I was sitting in silence, staring at numbers that refused to change. Effort was there, time was there, energy was gone. It felt like running in place for months, maybe years. And that quiet question kept repeating, how much longer can this go on? The mind was tired, the body was tired, even hope felt tired. And the worst part was not the lack of money. It was the feeling that nothing I did seemed to matter anymore. If you have ever felt that kind of emptiness, then you already understand this moment more than words can explain. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. There is something very few people realize. Right before giving up, the brain actually increases negative thought patterns by up to 70%. Not because things are getting worse, but because it is trying to protect you from more disappointment. That night, I did not know this. I thought I was failing. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought maybe this was just how life was going to be. And maybe you have felt this too. That quiet disconnection. That moment where even trying feels pointless. Where you start questioning your worth without even saying it out loud. It is heavy, it is isolating. And it makes you believe that you are alone in this. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. You were never broken. You were never lost. You were always exactly where you needed to be. But I did not believe that back then. That night, I reached a point where I stopped searching for answers. Not because I found peace, but because I had nothing left to try. And strangely, that is when something unexpected began to shift. Not outside, inside, quietly, almost unnoticeable at first. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this. But it changes everything. What I found next did not look like a solution. It looked almost too simple to matter. It came quietly, without excitement, without promises. Just an idea about those final moments before sleep. At first, I ignored it. It did not make sense. There were no complex steps, no big system, nothing that felt like it could fix anything real. And maybe you have felt this too, when something seems too small to solve something that feels so heavy. But something about it stayed in my mind. Not loud, not convincing, just present. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. There is a lesser known fact about the human mind that almost nobody talks about. In the last few minutes before sleep, your brain naturally enters a state where it becomes highly suggestible, similar to light hypnosis. Not because you are trying to change anything, but because your guard is down. Your logical mind steps back. And whatever you feel most strongly in that moment quietly sinks deeper into your subconscious. I did not fully understand this at the time, but something about it felt true. So one night, without expecting anything, I tried it. No pressure, no force, no pretending. I simply allowed myself to feel something different before sleep. Not think, feel. A calm sense of having enough. A quiet feeling of things working out. It felt unfamiliar at first. Even a little strange, like wearing something that does not quite fit yet. But it was also peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, my mind was not fighting itself. And maybe this is where you are right now. Tired of forcing, tired of trying to convince yourself. Just wanting something that feels natural again. Something that does not demand more energy when you already feel drained. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. The things that change your life the most often feel the least impressive in the beginning. I did not expect results. I did not look for signs. I just repeated this simple shift, night after night. And slowly something began to respond. Not instantly, not dramatically, but enough to make me pause and wonder. And what started happening next, I could not ignore anymore. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. The real reason money feels out of reach is not because you are doing too little. It is because you are doing too much in the wrong way. Most people never hear this, so they stay trapped in the same cycle. They overthink every decision. They check results too often. They feel pressure every time they spend, every time they earn, every time they wait. And slowly, without realizing it, money becomes something heavy in their mind. Something stressful, something urgent. And when something feels like that, you do not attract it, you repel it. Not because you are failing, but because your energy is constantly signaling lack instead of stability. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. There is a surprising psychological fact that explains this. The brain does not respond to what you want, it responds to what you consistently feel. So if your actions are driven by urgency, fear, or desperation, your mind starts treating money as something scarce and difficult. Even if you say the right things, even if you try to stay positive, that deeper feeling quietly shapes your reality. And that is why chasing money often creates more distance instead of progress. And maybe you recognize this in yourself. That restless energy, that need to fix everything quickly, that subtle panic when things do not move fast enough. It is exhausting, and it makes you feel like you are always one step behind, no matter how much effort you put in. But this is not a personal failure. It is a pattern that most people never question. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Money does not respond to pressure. It responds to alignment. When you stop chasing and start matching the feeling of already having enough, something shifts, not instantly but noticeably. The tension begins to soften. Decisions feel clearer. Opportunities feel less forced. It is not about ignoring reality. It is about changing the internal signal you are constantly sending without even realizing it. And once you understand this shift, the entire game changes. Because then the question is no longer how to get money, but how to become the version of yourself that naturally allows it. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. What if the moment you trust the least is actually the moment your mind is most powerful? Right before sleep, something quiet and almost invisible begins to happen. Your brain starts slowing down, moving from fast, analytical waves into slower, deeper ones. This is not just rest, this is transition. A doorway where your conscious control softens and your subconscious becomes more open than at any other time of the day. And here is the surprising part most people never hear. In this state, your brain does not clearly separate imagination from reality. It responds to what you feel as if it is already happening. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Most people use this powerful window without even realizing it, but in the wrong direction. They replay stress. They think about bills. They worry about tomorrow. And because the mind is so receptive in that state, those thoughts do not just pass through, they sink in, quietly, repeatedly. And over time they become patterns that feel real, permanent, and difficult to break. This is not because life is against you. It is because your mind is simply following the strongest emotional signal you give it before rest. But here is where something shifts. When you gently introduce a different feeling in that same moment, calm, certainty, enoughness, the brain begins to store that instead. Not forcefully, not loudly, but quietly, like a seed being planted beneath the surface. And just like a seed, you do not see it immediately. But something is happening. Something is reorganizing beneath your awareness. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. You are already programming your life every single night. The only question is whether you are doing it consciously or by default. And maybe this changes how you see those silent moments before sleep. Maybe it explains why certain patterns feel so deeply rooted. Not because they are permanent, but because they have been repeated in the most receptive state of your mind again and again. When I understood this, something clicked. Not intellectually, but deeply. It was no longer about forcing change during the day. It was about allowing change to begin in the quiet. And what I started doing next with this understanding made everything even more real. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. The technique that changed everything for me did not require more effort. It required less. It begins in the simplest way possible. You lie down. You allow your body to relax. Nothing forced, nothing controlled. Just letting the day slowly fade. And then, instead of letting your mind run on its usual patterns, you gently guide your attention inward. Not to your thoughts, but to a feeling. A quiet, steady feeling of already being okay. Not rich, not perfect, just stable, safe, supported. That is the starting point. Because the truth is, your mind accepts feelings much faster than it accepts words. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. A lesser known fact is that your subconscious responds nearly 5 times more strongly to emotion than to language. That means repeating affirmations without feeling does almost nothing. But even a small, genuine emotional shift, even for a few seconds, can begin to create change. So instead of trying to convince yourself of something big, you focus on something subtle. The feeling of relief, the feeling that things are working out quietly, even if you cannot see how yet. Then comes the most important part. You stay with that feeling without forcing it to grow. You do not chase it. You do not question it. You simply rest in it, like sitting in calm water instead of fighting waves. And when your mind drifts, which it will, you gently bring it back, not with frustration, but with patience. This is not about control. This is about familiarity, teaching your mind a new emotional home. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. It is not the intensity of the feeling that changes your life. It is the consistency of returning to it. And maybe this is where something clicks for you. That you do not need to be perfect at this. That you do not need to feel something powerful every night. You just need to show up gently, repeatedly, because over time, that small feeling begins to feel natural. And when it feels natural, it starts shaping your reality without effort. I followed this simple process night after night. No pressure, no expectations. And at first, nothing dramatic happened. But then, something subtle appeared. Something I almost ignored at first. And what happened next was the first real sign that this was working. The first sign it was working did not look like money. It felt like silence. Not the empty kind, a different kind. The kind where your mind stops fighting you for a moment. I woke up one morning and something was slightly different. The problems were still there, the situation had not magically changed overnight, but inside there was less noise, less urgency, less pressure, and it was so subtle that I almost ignored it. But that quiet shift mattered more than anything I had tried before. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. A lesser known fact is that real internal change almost always shows up as emotional neutrality before it shows up as excitement or success. Most people expect a big feeling, something obvious, but the truth is your system stabilizes first. It stops reacting so strongly, and that calm state is actually the foundation where change begins to build. I did not feel rich. I did not feel powerful. I just felt okay, and strangely that felt new. Then small things started happening. Not miracles, not life-changing events, just little moments that felt different. A delayed payment suddenly came through. A random opportunity appeared without me chasing it. Conversations felt easier. Decisions felt clearer. And each time there was this quiet sense that something was aligning, even if I could not fully explain it. And maybe this is where you start noticing it too. Not big results, but small shifts. A little more peace, a little less doubt. A moment where you do not feel stuck in the same way. It is easy to dismiss these things, to say they are nothing. But they are not nothing. They are signals. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Big changes rarely announce themselves in the beginning. They whisper. And I started paying attention to those whispers, not chasing them, not forcing them to grow, just noticing, allowing, trusting that something deeper was moving beneath the surface. Because once those small signs appeared, they did not stop. They started building, quietly at first, then more clearly. And what came next was no longer subtle. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. The moment it became undeniable was not when money came once. It was when it kept coming in ways I did not expect. At first it was small, a refund I had completely forgotten about. Then a payment that arrived earlier than promised. Then someone reaching out with an opportunity I did not chase. Each time it felt almost ordinary on the surface, but inside something felt different. There was no rush, no disbelief, no desperate relief. Just a quiet knowing, like this was supposed to happen. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. A lesser known fact is that the brain begins to normalize repeated outcomes after just a few consistent experiences. That means when something happens again and again, your mind stops seeing it as luck and starts accepting it as reality. By the fourth or fifth time, I noticed I was no longer surprised. By the eighth or ninth, I was calm. And by the 12th, it felt natural. Money came in different ways. Unexpected support. New ideas that turned into income without force. Situations resolving in my favor without stress. And what mattered most was not the amount, it was the ease, the absence of struggle. The feeling that I was no longer pushing against life, but moving with it. And maybe this is what you have been missing. Not more effort, but a different relationship with how things arrive. Because when something comes with tension, it leaves tension behind. But when it comes with ease, it creates more space for it to return again. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. When you stop treating money like a problem, it stops behaving like one. Each experience built on the last. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, and with each moment, my belief stopped being something I had to hold on to. It became something I could feel without trying. And that is when I realized something even deeper. This was not just about receiving, it was about why it was working at all. The reason most people stay stuck is not because they are not working hard enough. It is because they are working from the wrong place inside themselves. For years, I believed exhaustion was proof of progress. That if I pushed harder, stayed busier, sacrificed more sleep, something would eventually break open. But what actually broke open was me. Not my situation. Me. And I did not realize it at first. I just kept going, thinking effort alone would eventually win. But effort without alignment feels like running in circles. Fast, but not forward. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. A lesser-known fact in behavioral psychology is that chronic stress reduces decision-making accuracy and long-term reward perception. That means when you are constantly in survival mode, your brain literally becomes worse at recognizing opportunities that are already in front of you. So you work harder, but you see less. You push more, but feel further away. And that is the hidden trap of burnout culture. It rewards motion, not direction. And maybe you know this feeling too. The tiredness that sleep does not fix. The pressure that never fully goes away. The sense that you are always catching up to life instead of living it. It is not laziness, it is misalignment. A state where your energy is fighting your intention instead of supporting it. Here is where everything begins to shift. When I stopped asking, how can I force this to happen, and started asking, what energy am I operating from, things changed quietly. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in a soft release. Like tension leaving a body that did not realize it was clenched for years. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Success is not built first in action, it is built first in energy. When your internal state is aligned, even small actions create momentum. But when your internal state is scattered, even massive effort feels empty. I learned that the difference was not how much I did, but how I felt while doing it. And once I saw that clearly, I could not unsee it, because it explained everything I had experienced so far. The struggle, the resistance, and the unexpected ease that started showing up later. But there was still one hidden factor I had not fully understood yet. Something that was quietly influencing everything without me realizing it. The strange thing about this process is not that it does not work. It is that most people quietly stop it from working without realizing it. At the beginning, there is excitement, a sense of possibility, a feeling that something new is finally opening. But then almost silently, doubt starts to creep in. Is this really doing anything? Am I doing it right? Why is nothing happening yet? And that shift, that subtle change in inner tone, is often what breaks the momentum more than anything else. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. A lesser-known fact from cognitive neuroscience is that uncertainty increases neural noise in the brain, making it harder to sustain consistent emotional states. In simple terms, the more you question something while doing it, the more fragmented your internal signal becomes. And when your signal is fragmented, your subconscious does not receive a clear message. So instead of reinforcing one direction, you keep resetting the pattern over and over again. And maybe you have felt this too. Starting something with hope, then slowly checking for results too often. Changing the method, overthinking the process, feeling like you need to do it better instead of simply allowing it to settle. It does not feel like sabotage in the moment. It feels like responsibility. But underneath, it interrupts the very consistency that makes change possible. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Most people do not fail because the method is wrong. They fail because they cannot stay still long enough for it to work. Trying too hard creates tension, and tension sends the opposite signal of what you are trying to build. It is like trying to tune a radio while constantly switching frequencies. You never hear the message clearly, not because it is not there, but because you keep interrupting it. And the deeper awareness is this: inconsistency does not always look like stopping completely. Sometimes it looks like starting again and again with slightly different energy each time. Each restart resets the progress you were quietly building. But once you see this pattern, something shifts. You begin to notice the moments when doubt enters, the moments when urgency replaces trust, and in that awareness you gain a choice you did not have before. Because the real question is not whether this works. It is whether you can stay aligned long enough to let it unfold. Nothing changes until you actually begin. And the strange part is, beginning is far simpler than your mind makes it seem. Starting tonight, there is nothing you need to fix, achieve, or perfect. No special condition, no right mood. Just a few quiet minutes before sleep where you decide to stop running the same old patterns. That is it. The entire doorway begins there. Not in effort, but in presence. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. A lesser-known fact is that habit formation in the subconscious does not depend on intensity, but repetition in a consistent emotional context. That means even a small, simple practice done the same way each night has more impact than something complicated done inconsistently. Your mind does not need big signals. It needs familiar ones, repeated ones, safe ones. And maybe this is where relief starts to enter. Because you do not need to become someone else to do this. You do not need to feel perfectly positive. You do not need to force belief. You just need to show up with whatever you are feeling and gently shift it by even a small degree. That is enough, more than enough. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Transformation does not require perfection. It requires participation. So tonight, instead of overthinking or preparing or waiting for the right moment, you simply lie down and allow yourself to settle. And then you choose one simple feeling. Not something huge, something quiet, something like ease or enoughness or calm certainty. And you stay with it gently, not gripping it, not chasing it, just allowing it to exist for a few moments before sleep takes over. And if your mind wanders, you do not restart. You do not judge yourself. You simply return, softly, without pressure. Because this is not a performance. It is a signal you are sending to yourself. And over time, that signal begins to reshape how you respond to life without you forcing anything during the day. But there is still one final layer most people miss completely. Something that determines whether this becomes temporary hope or lasting shift. What you just experienced in this journey was not just information. It was a shift in how you see yourself, your patterns, and the quiet moments that shape your reality. It began with that feeling of being stuck, that silent frustration of trying harder but not seeing change. Then slowly something opened, the idea that maybe it was never about forcing life to respond, but about learning how to stop resisting it internally. Step by step, you saw how the mind shapes experience long before results ever appear, and how those small, unnoticed moments before sleep carry more power than most people realize. You moved through doubt, through curiosity, through skepticism. And somewhere along the way, that resistance softened into understanding. Not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because it started to make sense in a deeper way. The idea that your internal state is not just a reflection of your life, it is the starting point of it. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Most of what you are trying to change outside of you has already been shaped inside of you. And maybe that is the most important takeaway from all of this. You are not behind. You are not blocked in the way you thought. You are simply repeating internal patterns that can be gently rewritten, moment by moment, especially in those quiet spaces when the world slows down and your mind becomes open. Before you go, read this one last thing carefully. This might be the most important thing in this entire video. Change does not arrive when you finally become enough. It begins when you stop treating yourself as if you are not. Everything you just heard, you already knew. Deep inside, you just needed someone to remind you. And if something in this message made you pause, even slightly, then do not ignore that. That pause is where change begins. Not in force, not in pressure, but in awareness. You were never meant to struggle this hard. Life was never supposed to feel like constant pushing and chasing. There is another way, and you have already started remembering it. If this message reached you in the right moment, then consider subscribing to the channel, not out of habit, but so you do not miss what comes next. There are deeper layers to this understanding, and they unfold slowly for those who stay open. And if this resonated with you, like the video as well. Not for the algorithm, but as a quiet acknowledgement to yourself that something inside you is ready for change. And from here, the real journey begins.